Why do we seek the other way around? Again and again. For instance, think about it. Jesus didn't pray for himself. He always prayed for others. One time he prayed for himself in Gethsemane and God didn't answer that prayer. Am I right? Take the cup away and God didn't. Why do we pray for self? Don't you think that if we want to be like Jesus, Jesus' followers, we should do what he did? Forget self and pray for others. I tell you what, the more we forget self and pray for others, the more we forget self and serve God at any price, the more he can take care of you. Only when Abraham gave up his son, he finally got his son. Whatever you keep, you lose. And whatever you are going to lose, that's what you save. God cannot bless what you keep. God can only bless what you give. Think about the kid who gave the bread and the fish. Other people had food. Nothing was blessed and multiplied except what was given. God cannot bless prayers that are selfish and self-centered. God can bless prayers that are self-renunciation. I don't know how to say it in English. You get me. Crucified. I have been crucified. I die daily. I no longer live. Christ lives. I pray what he wants. I do what he wants. I don't care if I die. I don't care if I live. As long as I live for him or I die for him. That's when God can use you and me. That's when he can do miracles. Because then God can plan it and God can do it and we are not in the way. You follow me? I could give you example after example after example. There was a lady in my... We didn't start the sermon. I just want to clarify. This is not a sermon yet. This is only stories. There is a lady in my church that didn't come to church for 15, 20, whatever years. And she heard that something is happening in the church. And she came the last one and left the first one. You know why they do that? They don't want you to talk to them. Kind of leave me alone. And the lady... her hair was like the Romanian flag. I mean, blue, yellow, whatever. All the colors in the world. And rings all over. And the lady came to church, and she came when the church was, when I started to preach, I mean, yeah. And as soon as I said amen, she left. Well, I always talk to people who visit church. So I let the saints sing the song without me because they can sing the song alone. And I run after her. Maybe church people thought that I have to run to the bathroom. I didn't. But anyway, I don't care what they think. So I run after her. And she goes to the car. And she sees me. And she hurries. And I hurry. And she goes to the car. And she opens the door. And I put my hand on her car door. And stop the door. And she says, let me go. I said, And she says, but I want to go. I said, you will. Just slow down. Tell me your name. And she told me her name. I said, why are you in a hurry? I don't want to talk. I said, that's okay. I want to talk. So let's make a compromise. Let's talk a little. And she said, okay, only a little. I said, oh, that's good enough for me. You know, you just to hook them and that's it. You tell them about Christ and they never leave. And so I said, why did you come to church? That's it. And then I leave you alone. And her answer was, I don't believe in God. I said, duh, you came to church, nobody brought you here. I said, you don't even know how to lie, I said. I said, are you calling me a liar? I said, no, you did. I mean, you came to church, nobody brought you to church. Well, I don't believe in prayer, and you talked about prayer. I said, well, it depends how you pray. That makes a world of difference. Oh, you tell me that God answers every single honest prayer. Absolutely, my God, there is no prayer that will ever, Ellen White says, will ever go without an answer. But then she says in the next sentence, it will be a mistake to assume that he answers the way we want in the time we want. And then a few paragraphs later, she says, if we knew the end from the beginning, we would choose the same course. So I said, my God answers every honest prayer, just in a different way, not the way we ask. The best way, the way he knows. And she said, well, I did pray, and God never answered my prayer. I said, well, you didn't pray right. Oh, you tell me that if I pray the way you say. I said, no. I'm just trying to help you. I'm not saying that I know how to pray. I said, well, I prayed 15 years that God would help me give up drugs, and I'm still addicted, and I just gave up. I just don't believe that God cares for me. And I looked to her, and I stepped behind and say, yeah, I think he doesn't like you. You have blonde hair and blue eyes. God doesn't like blonde hair and blue eyes. And she says, are you crazy? I said, yep. And she says, what do you mean? I said, what do you mean when you say God doesn't like you? You think that God looks, what does he look for? Eyes, height, how big, how fat, how slim, how, you know English or Romanian? Well, God likes everybody. Isn't that what you said? God doesn't like me? Yeah, you have blue eyes. You see? I have, what color? Whatever, I don't know colors. Different eyes, he likes me. And she says, well, he didn't answer my prayer. And I said, listen carefully. I said, what did you pray for? Well, I prayed that God helps me give up drugs, get victory. I said, who did you pray for? Well, for me. I said, well, you see? That's the problem. Folks, is it okay to pray to give up addiction? Yes. Let me ask you a second question. Think hard before you answer. We all have our weaknesses because we are humans. Could be something on the internet, could be anger, could be a judgmental spirit, even if we say it in our mind, judging others, could be whatever. People who lose their temper, they try to be patient and they pray for patience and they are never patient, and sometimes when you pray more is when you lose your temper worse. Am I right or wrong? So, then how would prayer for patience help you if you pray for patience and you still lose your patience? Can it be, listen carefully, that the more you pray that God, oh, give me patience, give me patience, give me patience, you actually focus on your sin instead of focusing on Christ? And instead of confess your sin, forget what is behind, focus on the captain of your salvation, and keep your eyes for what is ahead. Because when you confess, God forgave, you are not in sin, you believe that you are forgiven, move on. And don't talk about sin to God anymore because you believe he forgave you. Why don't you focus on Christ from now on? So I said, you prayed that God would help you give up drugs for 15 years. So what did you talk to God about? Drugs. I said, that's what you do. What you talk. Stop talking about drugs. He said, what do you mean? I said, stop focusing on self. You are very selfish, obviously. I said, you Americans, not talking about you guys. I said, why do you focus so much on self? I said, we Romanians, we are all saints. And she smiled. She started to get that I joke, you know. I said, no, everybody is a sinner. I said, okay, now you get it. If everybody is a sinner, she started to get it. If everybody is a sinner, we all have our world. It's not only you with drugs. It is me with something else. So why do you think that you are the most miserable and God doesn't like you, but he likes me? And he doesn't answer your prayers, but he answers my prayers. Don't you think that he loves us all just the same? And she was quiet. And then I said to her, I'm going to promise today that God, starting today, will start working in your life and give you victory after victory from today on one condition. And she said, oh, you are going to tell me to pray even more? I said, nope. I'll tell you to stop praying, actually. She said, what do you mean? I said, what you do, you think is prayer. There's no prayer. That's poetry. It's a formula that you keep saying, same prayer. If you count, if you record yourself, you pray the same words all your life. If I would talk to my wife the same words every day, I would sleep on the couch. Prayer is the opening of the heart to God as to a friend. It's an open conversation with frustrations and everything. It's not poetry. Ta 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 ta. Amen. Same words. And I said, I don't want you to pray what you pray. I want you to go and give a Bible study and help somebody know Christ. And she says, me, a Bible study, ha ha. She says, I am a sinner. I am unable to change myself. How can I change somebody else? I said, that's the problem. You focus on self. I am a sinner. I am weak. I am a drug addict. I. All you say is I. Stop I. Focus on them. Because Jesus came for them, not for self. You want to be like Jesus? Don't care if you live or die. Who cares? You are not important. If you die, you die. What's the problem? Yeah, God doesn't need me and you. We need God. The church doesn't need you and me. We need the church. God can do the work with a donkey. God can do the work using rocks. Do you think that God needs you and me? Think about it. We need to do the work, not God. God gave us the work because we need to do it. Because as we serve others, we grow. We become more and more like Christ. He came to serve, not to be served. So I told her, you want to grow? This is what you do. You go and help somebody know Christ. He said, but I am unable. I said, easy. This is how you do it. This is the DVD. This is the lesson. This is the address. You go, knock in the door. You say, you see this? This is your request for a Bible study. So, you wanted a Bible study? This is study number 1. Bye. And you leave. And she says, that's it? That's it. What if they ask me questions? I said, be rude. Don't answer. She said, you mean it? I mean it. I said, you are the mailman today. Mailman is not going to convince you to pay the bills or to open the bills. He could not care less. He drops the bills and goes. So I said, today you are the mailman. You drop the Bible study and go. You don't answer questions. If they say, who are you? Hey, I have many other Bible studies to deliver. I am busy. Nice to meet you. Bye. Oh, I can do that. Okay. And then she looks to me and says, if I do that, you tell me that God will help me give up drugs? I said, yes. I said, who do you think you are, God, to promise me after 15 years of addiction that I give up drugs? I said, no, I'm not God, but I talk to God. And he told me to tell you that. Yeah, you talk to God. I said, listen. When she said, yeah, you talk to God. I said, listen. And I looked into her eyes. And she was like, I said, hey, stop wondering. Look here. And she stopped and she looked. I said, do you want to give up drugs or not? She said, yes, I want. I said, no. Do you really want to give up drugs or not? Yes, I want. I said, no. Tell me, do you want to give up drugs? Yes, I want. Then go and give a Bible study. And stop questioning. Okay. But if God doesn't help me, I will never come back to church. I will never pray again. I said, deal. She took the Bible study, the address, and she left. I didn't go home. I usually eat like 20 times a day. If I don't eat every 2 hours, I start shaking. I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you are healthy. It's just your metabolism is too fast. You burn everything you eat. So for me, to keep me without food is like you punish me. You know? But I didn't go home, though I was hungry. I stayed in my office, and I prayed for her. And that, for me, it's a big sacrifice. I mean, when it's about meal is holy. I cannot miss a meal. Okay, so if you now, you invite me over, if you don't have a meal, I don't come. You want to meet in the park, you bring a sandwich and I come. So, I went back to my office and I prayed for her. I said, Lord, help her understand the blessing of being a blessing. Because it's a greater blessing to bless than to try to be blessed. You follow me? Blessings come when you are a blesser, not when you want to be blessed. That's selfishness. So, I prayed for her. Well. Just about 45 minutes later, she calls me and she screams, I hate you, I hate God, I hate the church. Blah, 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 blah. She was going like, it was too loud. And I said, just slow down, what happened? And she says, God doesn't consider me worthy to even give a Bible study. I said, how do you know that? Well, it was an apartment building, and I would have to push a button, and somebody from inside has to buzz the door open, and nobody is home, so I could not give a Bible study. So God doesn't consider me worthy to even deliver a Bible study. I said, duh. Did you pray that the door opens? I said, no. I said, go and pray that God opens the door. Okay. She calls me 2 minutes later, and she said, I prayed, and God didn't open the door. I said, really? When did you start and when did you finish? Because it's only 2 minutes. He said, well, I did pray. I said, that's no prayer. Sister, that's poetry. Go and pray that God opens the door so you can give a Bible study. I said, okay, if 2 minutes is not good, how long should I pray? I said, I have the answer for you. Until he answers. And she says, put it in time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour. I said, sister, you don't know English. I'm going to say it in Romanian. I said, but I don't know Romanian. Okay, I say it again in English. Until he answers. And she said, but how long? I said, you don't listen. Until he answers. And she says, but 1 hour too? I said, listen carefully. You pray until he answers. If you have to stay there the whole night and you don't go to work tomorrow, and you stay the whole day tomorrow and he doesn't answer, and you stay until you get retired and you die in the car, you stay and pray until he answers. And she says, but I have a job. I say, well, this is what you have to choose. You want to give up drugs or you want a job? What do you want first? Who comes first, job or what do you want? You need to have priorities. Because you say you want God, but you love job more than God. Because that's what you put first. I cannot miss my job, but I can miss church. I can miss prayer. But I love God. Oh, how I love Jesus. Bologna. Yeah, if job comes first, who do you love then? Be honest. You follow me? So I said, sister, do you really want to give up drugs? Yes. Then pray until he opens the door. Because in the moment you start blessing others, that's the moment when you start being blessed yourself. Because whoever doesn't give up, mother and father, if he would have said mother-in-law, it would have been easy, but he didn't. Whoever doesn't give up mother and father and sister and brother and children and parents and job and self and life is not worthy to be my disciple. Think about it. If you are not willing to give up everything, how much is everything? How much is everything? Include your jobs, your house, your bank account, your life, your health. Think about it. We think we know that Bible verse. We don't. Before you are willing to give it all up, sacrifice it all for Jesus, you are not his disciple. And he cannot bless you. And he cannot answer your prayer. And he cannot use you. You first have to give it up. And then he can work through you. As long as you hold it, he cannot work through you. Think about it. So I told her, you need to give it up if you want him to answer the prayer. Forget job, forget food, forget everything. You pray until he answers. That's prayer. And she said, but that's hard. I said, well, show me what good thing happens easy. And then I said, but I make a covenant. I said, you don't know how important food is for me. Food is holy for me. But I'm not going to go home to my wife. I'm not going to go home to my food. I am going to stay in my office and pray until he answers your prayer. So basically, if you pray 3 days, I pray 3 days. If you pray a month, day and night, I pray a month. As long as you pray, I pray. And when you call me and say, God answered, then I stop praying and go home and eat. So is that fair? So you are not alone. And she was quiet. And then she said, I was like, are you still there? And she says, would you do that for me? I said, I already promised you I will do it. Because we got to pray for one another. When we care for others is when God works for us. And I said, I don't do it for you. I do it for me. She says, what do you mean? I said, well, if I care for you, God cares for me. That's a nice way to get cared of. And she says, you joke again. I said, yes. It's good to break the ice. It's good to joke. Clean jokes. Okay. So, people like it and they keep talking when you joke, you know? They don't get upset. So it's good to do that. That means to speech that is seasoned to salty. You season it a little. So I said, listen, I will pray with you as long as you pray. And I said, when God answers, God will change your life. She started to pray. It was around 1:30, 2 o'clock. She called me at 4:30. She was a different person. Pastor, you will not believe. Pastor, you will not believe. She was like a broken record. Pastor, you will not believe. I said, I heard you. Just tell me what happened. Let me decide if I believe it or not. Just say it. And she says, you know what happened? You know, and she had no air. You don't imagine what happened today. And she started to cry. I said, listen, stop crying and just tell me what happened. I thought somebody beat her, somebody whatever, you know. And she said, listen, this is what happened. Oh man, and I don't have time. I'm hungry. I don't need introduction. People talk to me and they go from Adam to Revelation. Tell me the subject. Just go around and around like Israel in the wilderness 40 years. You know, I said, tell me what happened. And she says, okay. I prayed for about half an hour And then I got angry because God doesn't answer my prayers. So I stopped praying. I opened my eyes and I started to argue. Why don't you answer my prayers? I said, sister, then you just started to pray. Before that was no prayer. She said, what? I said, when you prayed was no prayer. When you started to argue, that was prayer. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, think about Job. In a very respectful way, he was arguing with God. Basically, what did he do? He opened his heart with honesty and said, Lord, why does it happen? Because if you have the frustration inside, but you pretend in a fake way that you don't have it and you, oh Lord, thank you, but you are frustrated, that's fake. Prayer is the opening of the heart to God as to a friend. Be who you are. Tell him how you feel. Don't you think that the Lord is able to handle your frustrations and your emotions? He loves you. He knows what you have in your heart. Why hide it? It's better to talk to him about it. Lord, this is what I am. I come to you as I am. That's when you start praying. So she said, I prayed, he didn't answer. I got tired of praying. I got angry, opened my eyes, and started to argue. I said, well, then you started to pray. And she says, so as I opened my eyes, I said, why don't you answer? The pastor said that if I give a Bible study, I will change. I want to give a Bible. Let me do a Bible study. Why don't you? I know I am a sinner. And she says, as I was arguing, somebody opened the apartment building door, the entrance door, to go to the trash container with the garbage. So I said, Lord, sorry, I got to run. And she runs to the man and says, I was waiting here and praying that the door opens. Let me go inside. And he says, why? She says, well, I have a Bible study for apartment number 14. And they are not home. But I am supposed to give a Bible study because the pastor told me that if I give a Bible study, I give up drugs. So let me go stick it under the door and maybe I give up drugs. The guy says, what's wrong with you? And he was a big Schwarzenegger, I mean, big, Rambo, big back, tall. And she was small, and he says, but you know, I cannot let you inside. If they are not home, I'm not supposed to let you in. But I am upset, I am angry with you people. And she says, who are you angry with? With you. And she says, me? Why? You don't even know me. I asked for a Bible study and nobody came. And she says, well, that's no problem. I am supposed to give a Bible study. It doesn't matter who I give it to. So I could give you this Bible study and come back tomorrow and give them another Bible study. He says, okay, come in. And she says, no, I'm not supposed to come in. I'm supposed to deliver and go. He said, no. I never had anything to do with God. I know nothing about Bible study. I want you to come in and teach me. She says, me? To teach you? You don't know me. He took her by hand. Come in. And she, without realizing, entered. And he says, sit down. And she sat down. And he left the apartment, and she was alone in his apartment. And he left. And she was like, Pastor, I was praying for safety. And she says he came about 10, 12 minutes later with another 11 guys. All of them, leather jacket, ponytail, motorcycle people. And she was like, Lord, please protect me. And he says, folks, we all have been praying that God helps us give up drugs. And I pray that God would send an angel. And God answered my prayer today and sent this angel to help us give up drugs. Sit down and listen to her. And she says, Pastor, I made myself so small and I didn't know how to say it. And I said, folks, to be honest, I'm here because I'm addicted to drugs too. And this is what I learned, that if you give a Bible study to somebody, you get victory yourself. As long as you bless others, you get a blessing. That's what he promised. So I came here to give you a Bible study, but I'm addicted to drugs too. I know nothing. I cannot teach you, but I have a DVD and a lesson. Do you have a DVD player? Oh, yes, we do. We watch TV 24/7. I said, well, that's easy. Can you insert it in and play it? Oh, yeah, we can do that. They put the DVD, and all 11 plus 1 plus her, 13 people watch the DVD. Amen. And she says, Pastor, when the DVD was over, all of them were crying. And they said, we have never heard anything like that in our lifetime. would you please come back again with study number 2? And he said, Pastor, in that moment, I sensed God's presence in my life like never before. And she said, I was born an Adventist. It's like you can be born an Adventist. That's what we think. Oh, I'm Abraham's seed. I'm Adventist. And she says, I was born an Adventist. I went to church the first part of my life. I knew a lot about God, doctrines, 2,300 days and nights prophecy. It's like that will change you, you know. Satan knows that prophecy too. I knew about state of the dead. I knew about... Doctrines are good, but they don't help if you don't know the giver of the doctrines. Amen. And she said, I knew everything, but I've never experienced God's physical presence. And she said, when they were crying, I sensed physically God's presence around me, touching me. And I was afraid to speak because God was so strong around me that I put my head down and I started to cry. I said, Lord, why are you here? Because I am not worthy. You know who I am. And she said, Pastor, I sensed that God said, you don't need to look to self. I died for you. You just need to trust me. I know and I will finish this work in you. I have the power to make you new. And she said, Pastor, I heard him talking to me. And now I believe that you talk to him. And she said, you know what? When I don't take drugs for 2 hours, I start shaking. And she said, I came to church around 5:10 before 11 o'clock. And now it's 4:30. And I feel no need for drugs. And I said, praise the Lord, I can go home and eat. She never missed church since. And she keeps telling others. And she says, there is no reason to live unless you are a blessing and a light and salt. You follow me? And she says to others right now, if you don't tell, it means that you never experience it. Because if you experience it, you explode. You cannot keep it inside. It means you have only here, but nothing here.